Hey there everyone, and welcome back. Who's ready for another episode of Storytime? I'm pretty sure you are, because here we are yet again with another episode. Today's stories involve a camping trip in the Nevada desert, a story from the Power Outage of 2003, and even an experience at Disneyland. Of course, those are just a small example of the experiences we will be going over today, so I hope you will enjoy them. As always, make sure to stay around until the end for some bonus content. I'll talk to you then, but for now, let's get started, shall we? Story number 1. Camping in the Nevada desert. This was actually about 5 years ago, and ever since it happened, I can say that me and my cousin aren't exactly looking forward to camping again, at least not in the middle of nowhere. To start off our story, me and my cousin, who in this story we will refer to as Jennifer, were on a weekend vacation checking out the Grand Canyon. This was actually something we had planned on doing for some time, since both of us were taking a geography course in which we had to do a write-up on the Grand Canyon. Though our time there was shared with laughs and excitement, we left early on Sunday morning, satisfied with all the pictures and information we needed. You see, before returning to our home in LA, Jennifer wanted to go visit Rachel, Nevada on her way back. She's pretty interested in all the strange things that happen at the nearby bases, and I'll admit, she sort of got me curious as well. Therefore, that's where we were going. So, after several hours of driving, we arrived in the afternoon at the little inn in Rachel. Of course, right away, my cousin looked like she was in a candy shop. She jumped up and down, looking at all the pictures and newspaper articles that were scattered around the place. Anyways, after a late lunch, my cousin talked to the owners for a bit. Meanwhile, I stepped outside and took a nap in her camper. Now, I don't know how long my cousin was in there, but by the time I woke up, it was starting to get dark. I'd say around 6 p.m. This was when Jennifer walked in and said, "Hey cousin, you know what sounds like a great idea? I was talking to the shop owners about all these things. They told me that if we go out into the nearby desert, you can sometimes see strange lights. And oftentimes, you can see mysterious things. Come on, let's go." It should have been a great idea, but little did we know it was just the beginning of what was to come. See, for those who don't know, Rachel is sort of a small town. And no, I'm not talking about the kind that you might see about 1,000 people. There are literally less than 100 people here, and on this day, we would have guessed we only saw about 10. I mention this because you don't really expect to run into anyone, especially out in the nearby desert. Of course, my cousin and I were told not to go down any unmarked roads due to most of it being private land, so we mainly stayed to where we were supposed to be. We end up driving about 15 minutes from Rachel until Jennifer and I find this spot that's just off the main road. Out there was nothing but desert as far as the eye could see, but for Jennifer and I, it was perfect. With no one out here to bother us, we now go ahead and get our camping supplies ready. Setting up a small campfire in our chairs, we now sat down looking up at the stars, as well as enjoying some of the food we had brought with us. So far, everything seemed pretty normal, apart from seeing some occasional lights, which we explained away as aircraft. Finally, at around 11 p.m., we go ahead and step inside our little camper. Fast forward a couple of hours later, I want to say around 2 a.m., I just woken up about 30 minutes prior to use the restroom, and so I was still in the state of being awake and falling asleep. Out of nowhere, I could hear what sounded like tires on sand driving near us. I thought I was hearing things, but when I heard the sound of a car door close, I knew right away we weren't alone. Now I was hearing the sounds of footsteps in the sand as they slowly started approaching our camper trailer. Understandably, I was confused. After all, we hadn't seen anyone follow us here, and as far as we knew, we were on public land. This was when I started thinking that maybe we were on somebody's property by accident. But the more I kept thinking about it, the more the details didn't seem to add up. As I laid there in bed pondering this all, I could hear where the footsteps were walking around our camper. They were going over and over again, without once hearing somebody call out to us. Surely if we were here by mistake, they would have said something by now. Regardless, I now go to wake up Jennifer, who obviously was a bit confused by the situation. What's wrong? Don't you see I'm trying to sleep here? That's not the issue. Someone's outside the camper, and they're walking around. Don't you hear the footsteps? Mind you, we're whispering this whole time, and she was also able to hear the footsteps, thus confirming what I was hearing. Jennifer told me that perhaps it was an animal, but when I mentioned the sound of a car, she was now thinking it might be an officer. Now, against me telling her not to do so, Jennifer shouts out, "Hello? Who's out there? If you're an official, can you please identify yourself and let us know who you are?" There is no answer, no sort of acknowledgement whatsoever. Also, those footsteps we were hearing suddenly stopped. This was when we had the bright idea of just leaving and driving back to Rachel. But there was the problem. Where were the keys? Let's just leave. I'm sure if it was an officer, they would have said something by now. Come on, let's go. Jennifer, where exactly did you leave the keys? I thought they were on the couch. That's where I last saw them. Well, I don't see anything here, so I don't think your memory is exactly the best. Great. So without the keys, we're pretty much stuck out here in the middle of nowhere. We don't know on whether or not the person or thing outside had anything planned for us. Suddenly, me and Jennifer froze as we began to hear the sound of the door handle being opened. Luckily for us, it was locked, but that right away told us that whoever was out there had bad intentions. Suddenly, we could hear as something was hitting the door, and this was when me and Jennifer were pretty much running around the trailer, desperately trying to find the keys. As it turned out, Jennifer had left the keys in her backpack, so with them finally in hand, we start the engine and we race out of there. This was when I finally had the courage to look out the window, and as we're leaving, we can see as the headlights of a Jeep turned on and they drove off into the desert. Once at Rachel, we ended up parking near the inn and we'd stayed there until the sun came up. All the while, we were half expecting whoever was out there to have followed us into town. That never did happen, thankfully. So once the sun came up, me and Jennifer finally stepped outside. Now, we can see the damage that was done to our trailer. There are a bunch of scratch marks and dents on the door, and even the trailer itself. These weren't there the night before, and thus we were both left confused more than anything. We soon left Rachel and made it back to LA, where we had to pretty much explain how the trailer received the markings. In the end, we never did figure out who or what it was, but we haven't been camping ever since. Story number 2. The Power Outage of 2003. Do any of you remember the Great Northeastern Power Outage of 2003? It was that time when parts of the northeastern United States and Canada were hit with a sudden power outage that for some lasted a couple of days, and others even a couple of weeks. I remember it being just so sudden, and I remember how confused I was. I looked out the window at night only to see how dark it was. I was so used to seeing the lights of the houses on and even a street lamp shining, and having them all off made it seem like you were in a completely different world. I'll admit, not being able to play my PlayStation 2 to play my favorite games was annoying, but I figured that this would give me the excuse to finally step outside like my mom and dad kept telling me to do so. Of course, I'm pretty sure they didn't expect me to leave the house at night. I for one thought it was pretty cool to step out into the dark. But mind you, I was 15 years old at the time. I always told myself how brave I was. I recall telling my parents I was going to head on over to my friend's house, which actually was a lie. See, by around 9 p.m., power was restored to parts of my town, so I figured I could go and check it out. Little did I know that this would just be the beginning of what was to come. So, I got on my bicycle and started to make my way down the neighborhoods. As I'm doing so, I could see that the neighbors were wasting zero time, taking advantage of having no power, and they were holding a bunch of little parties on their front yards, having barbecues and making so much amazing food. I actually went by one of the neighbors I knew and he called out to me wanting to know if I wanted to stay over for some food. I thanked him for the offer, but I told him I was going to go over to my friend's house, which again was a lie. I now continue as I start reaching the downtown area. Now, sadly for me, it appeared that most of the power was still out and the arcade I wanted to go visit was closed for the evening. So, left with no other options, I head on over to the convenience store nearby to pick up a late-night snack. Luckily for me, they had backup generators going to keep the shop open. Here's when things were about to get weird. You see, as soon as I rode into the parking lot at the convenience store, I suddenly got this strange feeling. It was the kind you get when you know you're being watched. It looked to be the case because as soon as I went to park my bicycle, a man walks out from the nearby alleyway and he makes his way over to me. I really didn't pay too much attention to him as I made my way inside to pick up a hot dog with some chips and soda. Once I ate my food, I returned outside, only to see that my back tire was letting air out, and it appeared that somebody had cut the tire. I know for sure that my tire wasn't like that when I got there, so that's when I started thinking about the man I'd seen about 10 minutes earlier. He was no longer in sight, but of course with a flat tire, I now knew that I had to look forward to about a 20-minute walk home, and mind you, in the dark. I'm guessing you can tell where this is going. So, with the little light available, I start making my way back to my neighborhood. All the meanwhile, I'm having the feeling of being watched return. I can't help but hear the sounds of footsteps as I cross the street, but when I turn around, I see somebody quickly hide behind a tree. I, of course, couldn't tell who it was, but I did find it a bit odd that someone would be following me like that. Annoyed, I press on until I'm about 5 minutes away from the neighbors who were holding the party outside. I told myself that if I could just make it there, I would be safe. I just had to continue on. Well, all of a sudden, I was able to hear somebody calling out to me from nearby. "Hey you, stop. I need to talk to you about something." Honestly, I should have kept on walking, but instead I stopped and turned around. There he was, the same person I'd seen at the convenience store about half an hour ago. "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that you dropped your wallet and I wanted to return it to you." Now hold on, let's stop there for a second. Number one, I didn't have a wallet with me. All I had was cash in my pocket. Number two, if you say I dropped my wallet, then why would you wait to give it back to me? There was no need to follow me out here. This was when I called him out on it. "I'm sorry, but that's not my wallet. I think you might have me mistaken with somebody else." He lets out a laugh and he follows it up by saying, "So, did you like what I did with your bicycle? I thought you would enjoy it." I froze as soon as he said that because now I knew he had something on him, and chances are I was next on his list. So instead of continuing on with my bicycle, I do the next best thing. I toss it his way, and I take off running, screaming and shouting, and doing all I could to get somebody's attention. That seemed to work, because one of the nearby neighbors who was outside walks up to us and stops the person in their tracks. "Oh, you see, we were just playing a game. Come on, tell him." Robert then says, "Okay, well, if you're friends, then what's your friend's name?" He stutters for a couple of seconds before taking off, running down the street. With him finally gone, I thank Robert for his help, and he walks with me to the neighbor who is throwing the party. By this point, my parents had joined in on the fun and activities, and as you might imagine, they were confused at why I had returned so soon. But after explaining what had happened, of course they weren't too happy. Still, they were just glad I was safe and nothing did happen to me. The only thing that did happen to me was I got grounded and I couldn't use my PlayStation for a month. But hey, I learned my lesson. Story number 3. Mickey's Halloween Party Strangers. This happened last year when me and my friends went to Disneyland as part of Mickey's Halloween Party. If you've never been to that, it's essentially this separate event that Disneyland holds every year where a certain quantity of tickets are sold for people to come and enjoy various events. There are parades, trick-or-treating, fireworks, and so much more. Me and my friends were dressing up as our favorite anime characters. We were dressing up from a show called Love Live. This year was no different than the others. I dressed up as the character Mari, my other friend was Ruby, and her sister was Dia. Anyways, we spent the evening in the park having a great time, as well as meeting others who recognized the characters we were playing. As the night was going on, however, I did start noticing the same 2 people that had been following us. I mean, obviously there were a lot of people there, but I couldn't help but notice these 2 that kept walking close to us anywhere we went. I could tell right away they seemed off because they weren't even in costume, at least not that I could tell. Also, they didn't appear to be cast members since they didn't wear any of the uniform. They were 2 older men. One looked to be in about his late 30s wearing overalls with a ponytail. The other looked to be in about his 50s with a large beard and wearing all dark clothing. A bit strange, but I did my best to ignore them. especially because at one point they actually left, so I thought perhaps they had lost interest. That or maybe I was overreacting. About an hour later, it's around 11:30 p.m. and the park is going to be closing in about 30 minutes. At this point, my friends actually left before me since they got a call from their mom saying they needed to be home. They lived in the nearby area. Now, it was just me. Now, before leaving the park, however, I went ahead and go to the shop on Main Street to pick up a couple of souvenirs for my little brother back at home. So I'm in the store looking around when once again I was able to see the two I'd seen about 45 minutes earlier. They were just entering the store and right away I did my best to hide. Sadly, it appeared they had seen me because they now walked up to me and one of them started talking to me. "Hey, where did your other friends go? Surely you know it's not a good idea to be on your own." I thanked him for the obvious advice and I walked over to the cashier counter. That's when the other one says, "Wait a minute, little one. We weren't finished talking to you." He grabs my arm, but he lets go when one of the nearby employees sees what's happening. He says, "Excuse me, is something wrong here?" I was about to say something, but the one with the overalls says, "Oh, we're sorry. We're just leaving. I thought she was my kid for a second. Have a good night." They then walk out of the store. I was thankful for that employee helping me out, and I explained that I'd grown a bit worried seeing those two following me and my friends earlier. The cast member did offer to call security for me, but I told him not to worry about it. I said everything would be fine. I'll admit, I was a naive 19-year-old back then, and I still am. Well, sometimes. I honestly thought that maybe this was it for the night. But of course, it would only get worse. So once I paid for my things, I go ahead and leave the park and I make my way over to the Marriott. I'd say I was about 10 minutes away at this point and the large crowd I was around was slowly starting to disappear. At this point, there were only a couple of people walking nearby me and all I could think about at that point was changing and sleeping in the nice warm bed. Well, as I'm about to cross the street to the Marriott, I hear a familiar voice. "Hold on. Wait for me." I turned around and guess who I see? Remember the man with the overalls from earlier in the park? Well, now he was back, only this time his other friend was gone. This was when I started getting a little bit nervous, because how in the world did he know I was here? Looking back, I'm pretty sure they were carefully following me around without me noticing. "Hi there. I was wondering, could I get your number so we could go out sometime?" Under normal circumstances, maybe, but this wasn't a normal circumstance. We're talking about this stranger who appeared to have other intentions. This was when I made up a lie and I said, "Sorry, but I don't have the time. And besides, my dad's waiting for me in the lobby at the Marriott. Sorry, maybe some other time." Apparently, he couldn't take no for an answer because once again, he tries to reach out to me. Before doing so, I start making a mad dash to the Marriott, where I could see a security guard just through the doors. As I make it inside and run over to the security guard, I can see that the man was no longer anywhere in sight. Obviously, he was surprised by what I was telling him, but he ends up going outside, heading towards where I'd last seen him. That was pretty much it. I went back to my hotel room, and soon I tried my best to put the encounter behind me. I actually didn't hear anything else, so it's safe to say that they ended up getting away. Now, even though it did happen, I'm actually planning on returning back in a couple of weeks. Who knows? If you're at Disneyland in the month of October 2018 and you see a group dressed up as Love Live characters, then chances are it's me and my friends. I just hope I don't see those two from last year. I'll just make sure to be more careful this time. Story number 4. The bears that distracted us from the snake. Imagine this. It's 1995. You're in the middle of nowhere in the Louisiana wilderness, and suddenly you're face to face with a wild animal. Sure, it might not sound so bad at first, but once I recount what happened to me and my girlfriend, you might think otherwise. We were literally in a situation where if things hadn't played out the way they did, then chances are I wouldn't be here to tell you this story. So, to set the scene, as I mentioned earlier, this happened in the 1990s. This puts me and my girlfriend at around 20 years old. Back then, me and my girlfriend were really into camping and exploring. Honestly, it wouldn't be surprising for us to leave home and spend the entire weekend out in the wilderness. Before continuing on, it's important to note that there are no cell phones at this time. Therefore, if you needed to call for help, then you better hope you find somebody with a house phone. Otherwise, you're on your own. Not that a cell phone was going to help. I mean, we've still gone back to the same location years later, and cell phone reception isn't exactly the best. Anyways, our plan was to go and visit a cabin that was next to a secluded lake. To get there, you leave the nearest town, which was at least 20 minutes away. Then once off the highway, you take this winding dirt road that takes you into the woods. It's about 5 miles, but eventually you do reach this opening that featured both the cabin and the lake. Now, before continuing on, I guess I should explain this next part. See, this cabin was actually owned by this older man and woman who we knew, and they lived about 20 minutes away. They lived towards the start of the dirt road, but in order to get to their house, you had to go down a private driveway. Anyways, before heading over to where we would be staying, we stopped by their house to pick up the keys for the cabin. Safe to say, we ended up staying there for a little bit longer, and finally we head on over to the cabin at around 10 p.m. Sorry, it's just that they make awesome spaghetti and they wanted us to stay over. One thing they did tell us, however, was to be aware of our surroundings when walking around in the woods. The older gentleman told us that they'd been seeing more bears than normal. Of course, they reminded us to be careful. With that, we head on over and settle in for the night, ready to enjoy our exploration tomorrow. This was when it would all take place. Early the next morning at around 6 a.m., I awoke to what sounded like heavy footsteps and the sounds of a bear. Turns out that there was a bear. It was scratching his back on the tree that was just about 50 feet away from our cabin. It was an awesome sight to see, but it did remind us that we weren't alone out here. Honestly, that should have been the sign for us to leave, but we weren't about to let that get to us. So, after some breakfast, which consisted of scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast, we grab our backpacks and other essentials and we begin the walk into the woods. Our plan was to go down one of the dirt trails we were familiar with, and it takes you through the woods. It's about 10 miles, and eventually it takes you to another lake. Once we reach the destination, you are greeted by an opening where you could see a nearby set of mountains and even a valley. Okay, now I'll go ahead and skip ahead to our return trip back, as most of the time there at the lake was uneventful. By this point in the day, it was around 6 p.m. and the sun was just beginning to set. At this point, me and my girlfriend were about half a mile away from our cabin, and we're now looking forward to relaxing for the rest of the night. Well, as we're walking and appreciating the nature around us, we are both able to hear movement just a couple of hundred of yards away. We both look as we see a bear with 2 bear cubs seemingly just enjoying the afternoon walking around in the woods. Honestly, it was a wonderful sight, but that bit of distraction was enough to cause what happened next. See, as we were keeping an eye on them and walking, I hadn't noticed the snake that was just beyond our line of view. Let's just say that as soon as I became aware of our little friend, I suddenly felt this sharp, painful sensation in my lower leg. Immediately I yelled out and I looked toward the ground. That's only to see the snake making his way into the woods. From the color of the snake, I was able to identify it as a coral snake, and immediately I knew this was bad. For those who don't know, they're quite venomous, and if you don't get the bite treated, well, you know what happens next. Just like that, my girlfriend helps me get to the cabin where we actually see our friends waiting for us there. We were going to be having dinner at the cabin, and so they were actually there preparing food. In summary, we immediately drove over to the nearby town where, thankfully, I got there just in time. It's now been over 20 years, and even though those two are no longer around, me and my now wife go there and visit from time to time. Luckily, no more encounters with snakes, so that's a good thing. Story number 5. My cat saves me from the stranger. This is perhaps one of the more weirder things that's ever happened to me, and I still haven't forgotten about it. It took place about 3 years ago when I was living in a townhouse in Toronto. This also took place during the winter time when the nights were longer than usual, and the cold outside had people staying indoors. This was one of those evenings where myself, along with my cat, had chosen to stay inside and I was playing PlayStation with my friends. This was something that we always did every Saturday night, and this evening was no different than the others. I remember we were really into Uncharted 4, and we enjoyed playing the multiplayer until like 3 in the morning. Now, before continuing on, let me go ahead and describe some things. I actually lived with another roommate, but she was away for a couple of weeks visiting family, thus the reason I was the one by myself. Also, the neighborhood I lived in featured about 10 townhouses, in which most of the neighbors kept to themselves. Really, I just barely moved in about 2 months ago, so I wasn't familiar with everyone. Even so, there's that important detail: everyone keeping to themselves. That's why I found my visitor that evening a bit strange. Okay, so back to where we were. It had been another awesome session of Uncharted 4, and by now it's closing into 3 in the morning. Once I turned the PlayStation off, I went ahead and head straight to bed. I'd say about an hour later, I awoke to the sounds of footsteps in the living room, and I even heard what sounded like somebody whispering. I thought this was weird, so as I started paying more attention to it, the more I was telling myself perhaps I was just hearing things. I go ahead and close my eyes yet again, but when I suddenly heard the door to my room opening, I knew in that instance I wasn't there alone. All of these things suddenly started racing in my head. Could it be my roommate was back home early and she was checking up on me? Sure, that could have been possible, but normally she will knock before entering my room. There was no knock this time. Could it be my cat opened the door and I was hearing her footsteps? Again, very possible, but unless my cat can talk, then it wasn't her, and besides, she was right next to me fast asleep. It was only now she got up and started meowing. I laid there frozen, not knowing what to do. If I do get up and try and get out the window, would I even have enough time to get out? As I waited, I could hear as a man's voice started singing in a low voice, and now he was calling out to my cat. "Come over here, little kitty. Let's go ahead and play. Come on." What's that? Are you saying your owner is fast asleep in the bed? I hope your owner doesn't mind if I laid there too. At this point, my cat was hissing, and I could hear how angry she was. I'd say that was the awesome thing about my cat. Sure, she acted like a princess, and sometimes she was spoiled, but she would protect you any time you were in trouble. Suddenly, I hear her jump towards him, and I lift the covers up to see her scratching at his face. This was enough to cause him to run out the door, then jump out the living room window. Immediately, I closed and locked the window and I called for help. Help did arrive in record time, but even though the entire area was searched, whoever that stranger was never caught. We did, however, find a bunch of muddy footprints on the carpet, as well as what looked to be scratch marks on the window he entered through. It's safe to say that if my cat wasn't there with me that night, then things might have been completely different. Story number 6. My dog warns me of the stranger. Honestly, I've heard so many stories of people being home alone that I figured now would be an awesome way to share it with you all. As a side note, I should mention now that I'm not exactly a fan of staying home alone anymore, but back then, it's all I could really think of. Honestly, who doesn't want to have the house to themselves? Without your parents around, you can listen to all the loud music you want, and you can be as annoying as you want it to be. Okay, so my idea of fun may not be like yours, but I was pretty simple. Anyways, this took place about 10 years ago, right before I was starting college. I was 17 and I wasn't really doing much that summer break, apart from helping out my parents. My family and I lived in Oklahoma, about an hour outside of Tulsa, where we owned a small farm. My family owned quite a bit of property, so it wasn't a surprise to see nothing but fields and farm animals. Our farm was pretty basic. We had our house, our little barn, farm animals, fields, the normal. Looking back, we had about 10 acres of property, so getting around sure wasn't easy. Luckily for me, my dad bought me an ATV, and I remember all the times I would take my cousins with me for a ride around the property. Also, in case you were wondering, we had no neighbors, and we were the only property for at least a 10-mile radius. Well, with that information out of the way, I know what you're waiting for: the experience I had. Let's get started with that. I remember it was the middle of July and we had gotten an unexpected rain that week. How I still remember the humidity. Well, this one evening I decided to stay by myself and take care of the property. Both my mom and dad were actually visiting family about 2 hours away, but since I lied saying I was sick, I chose to stay home. I wasn't truly alone, however. You see, we did have a golden retriever named Roxy. She was so sweet, and I do remember all the times we would play outside. I really do miss her. Anyways, my responsibilities for that weekend were pretty basic. Make sure to feed the farm animals and just keep an eye on the property. I mean, let's face it, we're out here in the middle of nowhere. What was I to worry about? The first night went by pretty normally, apart from Roxy barking in the middle of the night. Though annoying, I just ended up ignoring it, but that's until I did notice something different about that morning. It was now Saturday and me and Roxy got up getting ready to take care of things. As soon as I stepped outside, however, I noticed a couple of things were off. For starters, the chairs we had on our porch had been tossed around and they were no longer in the spots we had left them. Something else to note were the muddy footprints seeming to circle around our property. I actually followed them half expecting to find somebody waiting for me, but instead I was only able to see tire tracks driving down our private dirt road. I of course became curious about this, but I wrote it down to my parents arriving late at night to pick something up. I did however think of Roxy barking the previous night, but I soon put everything behind me, telling myself there had to be an explanation. As expected, the rest of that morning and afternoon go pretty fast, and it mainly consisted of me and Roxy walking around and checking up on the animals. Let's go ahead and fast forward to around 7:30 p.m., so right around sunset. Right now, I sat on the front porch reading a magazine and Roxy was asleep on the field next to me. Out of nowhere, I started hearing barking and when I looked up, I saw that a car was making its way down our road. Thinking it was my parents, I get up from the chair and I go to meet up with them. Instead, I was welcomed with a Hummer of all things, as it slowly drove up to my property and just sat there. Surely if my parents had somehow won a new Hummer, they would have gone and called me about it, right? By this point, Roxy was by my side and that's when she started growling. I'll admit, I was confused since the windows were darkened, making it pretty impossible to see who was inside. For what felt like hours, but it was more like a minute, me and Roxy stood there staring at the Hummer, not knowing what this person wanted. Finally thinking this was something bad, me and Roxy turn around and start heading back in the house. But that's not before somebody calls out to us. Wait, hold on. I need your help. I turn around and I'm welcomed with a man who looked to be in his early 30s. He had a nice business suit and tie on, and suddenly he stepped out and began walking over to me. Look, I'm really sorry to bother you like this, but I'm sort of lost. Do you mind helping me out? He did seem genuine and friendly, but Roxy couldn't help but growl the entire time. It's kind of like she knew this person was bad news. I, of course, being the naive one, ended up telling him, "Yeah, I'm sorry, but I can't really help you out much. I'm home alone right now as my parents are out for the weekend." This was when he got a smile on his face and he said, "Oh, is that so? Well, make sure you have those doors locked and don't open the door to strangers. After all, you're out here in the middle of nowhere. I'm pretty sure help wouldn't arrive in time if something were to happen." I let off a nervous laughter and with that I said goodbye as he got back inside his Hummer and left. Sadly, that was only the beginning. I'd found the talk with him a bit weird, but as I mentioned, I wasn't really worrying too much. Now, fast forward another couple of hours later and it's around 10 p.m. Me and Roxy were in my room watching a movie when all of a sudden I had this feeling of getting up to look out the window. In a way, I'm happy I did. See, very quickly, my room was located on the second story, and from my window I had a perfect view of our dirt driveway. Therefore, I could see if anybody was driving up to our property. Well, as it so happened, I could see headlights slowly approaching my house. I mean, seriously, I don't know why, but whoever was driving was going pretty slow. I guess they didn't want to make a bunch of noise. I now watch as, of all things, a Hummer parks in front of my house, and I now see as 3 people stepped outside wearing darkened jackets and hats. I mean, let's get one thing out of the way. It was easily 80 degrees and humid, so I don't think it's exactly sweater weather. I'm now watching from my window as the front porch light comes on, and immediately I start hearing knocking on the front door. It's difficult to hear it at first, but it sounded more or less like, "Hello, I know you're home. It's your friend from earlier. Why don't you come outside and play? We need to have a talk with you." This was when I look over to Roxy and she looked just as anxious as me. This was when I finally get the bright idea to get on my phone and call for officers. Of course, explaining what was happening was one thing, Actually waiting for them to get here was another. You see, the nearest officer was at least a 20-minute drive away, so it would be quite a bit of waiting. In the meantime, I'm still hearing knocking at the door, but soon everything went quiet. Just as I think things are finally over, I hear the sound of a window breaking, and that's when I immediately froze. Whoever these people were are now inside the house, and what they had in store, I had no idea. Quickly, I had to come up with what my plan was going to be. I couldn't just run downstairs and take them all on by myself. Then again, if I just stayed in my room, then surely they would come sooner or later. That's when I thought about the attic we have. See, I didn't mention this earlier, but we do have an attic. But the only problem is, it's in my parents' room. If I could just get in there, surely I could hide from them. That was the plan. As quickly and as quietly as we could, me and Roxy run over to our parents' room that was down the upstairs hallway, and we managed to avoid being heard. My best guess was that they were focusing on searching for what they could find on the first story. Now inside my parents' room, I locked the door and I put a chair in front of the doorknob to make sure it was more difficult for the strangers to open it. From there, I opened the attic door, and quickly, me and Roxy step inside. Once in here, we finally felt safe and we waited for another 10 minutes until we could hear the familiar sounds of sirens. As soon as I could hear them, I heard the footsteps downstairs get quiet as the three people run out the house and get inside the Hummer and leave. At this point, I don't know what to expect, but I hear an officer downstairs saying, "It's okay to come on out. You're safe." Mind you, I hadn't mentioned this part either, but I was still on the phone with the operator. But regardless, she now tells me it's safe to step outside. As I do, wow, let me tell you, this place was a mess. Tables and chairs were tossed around, and there was even a broken window. In the end, I gave the best description I could, and they told me they would keep a lookout. Unfortunately, they were never found. Story number 7. The Mysterious Caller. You know what really gets to me the most? It's working late at night, then getting strange phone calls. Honestly, it's not exactly the most ideal way to spend your night, but it's what started happening to me. About 5 years ago, I was a manager at a pretty popular retail store in Canada. My job for the most part was, well, exactly that. Managing the store, and of course making sure everything was how it needed to be. This of course would mean that there would be times I would be left at the store by myself, going over documents and making phone calls. This is where I found myself one December evening during our holiday rush. Our store had closed at around 10 p.m., and myself, along with a fellow security guard, were left in the store on our own. For this story, we will call him Albert. Albert mainly stayed outside guarding the building, and I was inside the office working on papers and making phone calls. This evening at around, I'd say, 11 p.m., the phone to the office started ringing. Now, normally I don't answer the phone since it was after hours, but I decided to answer anyways. "Hello, thank you for calling. This is Adrian speaking. How may I help you this evening?" There is no answer. Now I end the call and go back to what I was doing. Not even a minute later, the phone rings yet again. "Hello, thank you for calling. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking with right now?" Nothing. A bit annoyed now, I just assume it's one of the local kids playing a joke on me, and I try my best to ignore it. Another 20 minutes or so pass, and the phone rings yet again. This time I don't end up answering, but I do notice that a message was left. "Why didn't you answer the phone? You shouldn't have done that." That was the simple message that was left, and even though it was simple enough, I couldn't help but get this strange feeling. This was when I was surprised by Albert entering the room. "Hey, Albert, I was wondering, have you gotten any phone calls late at night?" "No, I'm afraid I haven't actually gotten any calls. Why? What's up?" I explained what had happened, and as I'm doing so, both me and Albert suddenly hear alarms go off in the store. Surely no one else was supposed to be in here. After all, the store was closed. Albert now goes into the store, and as he leaves the room, the phone rings. On the other end, I can hear the alarms of the store, and there's a voice that tells me, "See, I told you, you shouldn't have done that. Now where are you so I can teach you your lesson?" This time around, the voice seemed a lot more angry with me, and I was unsure as to why. Needless to say, Albert checks the entire store, but all he was able to see was the door at the front was broken. No one was inside the building, and no one was outside. It remained unexplained until, of course, we called officers and we checked the security footage. The only thing we did see was somebody sneaking around the back of the building, then taking out their phone. This was when I guess they had made the phone calls. After, we watched on the tape as he makes his way over to the front, throws a large rock at the door, and then runs away. Sadly, since he was wearing a dark hoodie with a hat, we weren't able to tell who it was, and thus, we never did find out who it was. Also, the phone calls stopped after that. Not really sure who it was, but it's truly something I won't forget. Story number 8. Getting lost on our trip to Yosemite National Park. Winter 2004. My friends Susan, Maria, and myself were on a weekend-long road trip going to visit Yosemite National Park. We are originally from Tucson, Arizona, so like you might expect, it was quite a bit of a drive. This was the day and age before anybody had a smartphone, so we had to rely on MapQuest and GPS, which at the time wasn't exactly the best. I mean, the main problem was if you reached an area that didn't have good signal, you could get lost, especially when the hours of driving get to you. Not that my friends and I switched driving, it's just that this was our first time going on a road trip. You see, we left in the early morning hours of a Saturday, and by the time we reached California, it was already getting dark at around 5 p.m. At one point in the drive, we reached a mountainous area that wasn't exactly cooperating with our GPS. There would be times we had no signal, and there would be other times when it would tell us to go in a completely opposite way. Eventually, we were able to get our bearings until, of course, of all times, it started to rain pretty heavily. This combined with the fog that was forming, well, it made it difficult for us to see any signs on the road. I'd say by 7 p.m. or so, we finally confirmed that we were lost. Here we were, on this back road that our GPS told us to go down, and from the looks of it, it was taking us the complete opposite way. Luckily for us, we happened to see somebody parked to the side of the road working on their car. At first, we considered just driving away. After all, you're in the middle of nowhere at night with rain, and you're going to stop to talk to a complete random stranger? Of course, we didn't want to just assume he was bad, so we ended up stopping and kindly talking to him. "Hello, excuse me, sir. My friends and I are lost. Do you live around here? Do you know the best way to get back on the main highway?" He looked old, and his clothes were dirty and old, and he appeared like somebody who lived out here. Again, we almost just considered leaving, but what other choice did we have? He says, "Oh, no problem. I actually live around here. Just continue going down this road and you'll reach the highway. A lot of people make the mistake of driving out here, but don't worry, you're going the right way." We thanked him for the information and we continued on. The thing is, the more we kept driving down this road, the more it became difficult to maneuver. You see, the road got to a point where it was very unmaintained, and you could see even a bunch of old abandoned houses. It was a really strange feeling, and this was when we started thinking that we were tricked. This, of course, wouldn't even be the start of it, because soon the road reaches an end, and right in front of us were a series of old homes. Of course, our GPS was still not working, and now we were stuck out here not knowing where to go to next. All of a sudden, my friends and I become aware of movement through our headlights, and now we see as a group of people begin walking out of the buildings, almost like they were in some sort of trance. That sight itself was enough to cause bad dreams, but what was even worse was as we're turning around to head back the way we arrived, we see headlights approaching. We take off, but that's not before the vehicle approaching almost hit our car. Immediately, we became aware that that vehicle was actually the same one we had seen with the man about 10 minutes ago. What happens next is about 15 minutes of being chased down this back road until finally our GPS comes back on. Just as we figured, we had gone down the wrong way, and we just barely missed the road we were supposed to have taken. Either way, we are able to find our way back and we end up losing the guy from earlier. Not sure if that was his way of trying to get us back on the right road, but if it was, it didn't explain the people we saw at the buildings. Seriously, it was such a weird sight to see. Regardless, we did make it to Yosemite National Park, and soon we put the experience behind us. Story number 9. He was at the window. This took place 2 nights ago, and as of now, I don't really know what to think of it. If anything, it has me more paranoid than concerned. It was a night alone with my little brother and I playing some video games, and all in all, we were enjoying being home alone. I am 20 years old and my little brother was 9. Anyways, we had chosen to stay home because our parents were at a party and wouldn't return until later in the evening. Knowing them, they probably wouldn't have returned until 2 a.m., and my brother and I weren't exactly looking forward to just being at a table watching people dance. It's not exactly our cup of tea. Regardless, I will quickly describe where we lived. We lived just on the outskirts of Bisbee, Arizona, which for the most part was a pretty quiet town. It's not really a place where you expect anything to happen. Our home was located with a small desert field behind us, with a main road being down the middle. Homes were pretty scattered apart, with our nearest neighbor being less than a quarter of a mile away. As for the house itself, it's a single-story, 2-bedroom home that featured a basement. That's where my brother and I were playing video games. Something else to note was the little window in which you could actually see the front lawn. You would actually have to climb on top of the couch if you wanted to take a look outside. Up until this happened, not having a curtain there wasn't really an issue. After all, it's not every day you expect to have somebody just staring at you from there. I'm guessing you know where this is going. So there we were, just playing some cooperative multiplayer when my brother says he needs to go use the restroom upstairs. We pause the game and he heads up. Meanwhile, I take my phone out and browse the internet. There I sat distracted for about 5 minutes until all of a sudden I heard my brother yell something from above. I was confused about it, but at the same time I ignored it. See, my brother and I are known for playing jokes on one another, and I was thinking that this was yet another one of my brother's jokes. The only thing is, he kept trying to get my attention, so finally I get up from the couch and I take a look. Here's where I saw something. As I'm making my way up the stairs, I reach that halfway point where I can see outside our little basement window. What I see makes me freeze. There, staring back at me, was someone in a mask. They then began knocking and appearing to try to open the window. But luckily for us, the window is stuck, and it's not exactly easy to open. This is when I run upstairs and I finally meet up with my brother, who tells me, "You're never gonna guess this, but somebody's outside the house. I went to use the restroom, and as I walked outside, I looked toward the living room window. There was somebody staring at me, but as soon as I moved, he just runs away." I now explained to him that I'd seen him at the basement window. Immediately I get on the phone, but by the time officers arrive, he isn't found. They do tell us they'll check out the area for anyone suspicious, but like I mentioned, nothing as of yet. Story number 10. Why I don't like walking at night anymore. This literally just happened last night, and if it weren't for my pet dog with me, I think things might have turned out a bit different. I live in a rather small community right outside of Vancouver, Canada. On this night, my Siberian Husky and myself were walking on a trail that was right across our street. I'd say that was one nice thing about my neighborhood. It's this nature trail we have for people to walk on. Now, normally we will walk during the daytime, but on this evening I chose to go a bit later. You see, I work at the library at my university, but since my schedule got changed, I ended up working during the day. This meant that our morning walk turned into a nightly one. Moving on, myself and my dog were about a quarter of a mile down the trail, when all of a sudden, I became aware of movement up ahead of me. Just beyond a poorly dimmed street light, I could see the shadow of somebody walking my way. A bit odd to encounter somebody at 10 p.m. at night, but I figured perhaps somebody was doing just what I was. As he got closer to the light source, I could see a bit more details. He was wearing a dark blue hoodie alongside some dark jeans. Honestly, I was hoping he would have walked past me, but as soon as he saw me, he just stood there. I would think that if he was walking out here, he'd make his way, but no, it's like he just froze. This was when my dog started growling, almost as if to warn me of him. This was also when I decided that now is a great time to start heading back home, not that anybody needed to tell me. As we're doing so, I no longer see him. I figured maybe he had lost interest. That wouldn't be the case, however, because as I see my house and I'm about to cross the road, I hear a voice calling out to me, "Come back here. Why won't you join me out here? Come on, we could have so much fun together. That was more or less what he said. That was enough to send me running back to my house and closing and locking the door. That was pretty much it. Sure, I know what you might be thinking. How is that really so bad? Well, unless you're in my shoes and you were out on a dark trail with little light, then let's just say you'll never know what it felt like. Hello everyone, you made it to the end. Awesome. I'm glad you can join me here. Hey, a quick thank you for watching and listening to today's narration. It was truly a pleasure to have you around. Now tell me, what did you think of today's episode? Let me know which one was your favorite down below. I think that Disneyland was the one I enjoyed the most because I actually go to Disneyland quite often, so I can relate. As many of you who follow me on Instagram know, I go there pretty much every weekend. Thus, if you don't want to miss any of my silly Disney adventures, then make sure you're following me on my Instagram. That way you never miss anything. But yeah, it's that time of the video. It's question time. Let's see here. Oh, I got a good one. Since it's October, my question for you is this. What are you planning on dressing up for as Halloween? I'm not exactly too sure yet, but I'm sure I'll come up with something silly. But yeah, I know exactly what else you want, and that's the fun bonus content at the very end. Well, let's check out some fun little pictures and a couple of videos, shall we? Like I mentioned, I love going to Disneyland, and there was actually a time when there used to be a small petting zoo area. This was actually where you would find me. I love going to go and pet the different cute animals. Here I am, actually there petting one of the many goats. I remember how funny they were because they just sat there and they loved being scratched. Such good times, I'll tell you. This was actually back around, I think, 2014? Yeah, 2014. Next up, we have another little video. This time, I'm showcasing my 4 birds. The main one, which is the dad, is the one that's always with me. The other ones, well, they get a bit nervous, so they usually keep their distance. Here we have little Ruby once again with her funny little faces. She always makes these faces when she's on the couch. Actually, she normally does this when you're about to take her to bed. She's like, "No, I don't want to go to bed yet. No!" Next up, we have this picture of a pelican and myself at the beach. Sometimes I'll be filming and I can't help but stop and take a picture with one of my animal buddies. This was back around October 2017. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today's bonus content. As always, I thank every single one of you for taking the time to watch and listen, and even staying around until the very end. I hope I'll see you next time. But until then, take care, my friends, and have an amazing day.